All right, good deal. We're live. Hey, good morning, guys. This is Coffee Talk. I'm Tom Quigley, and I have Robbie and Sam Rashad on today. Did I say that correct? Rashad?
Close enough. Rashid is good, but that's
Close
fine.
enough. I know I've known you through Facebook. We've never actually talked, but I've followed you over the years, your poker playing, your businesses that you've been
That
in.
bad?
Yeah. I just thought it would be great. Me and Robbie were talking about it, that you even trained with him for a while. So I think we've all been connected in one way or another. And now I'm here in Valrico. How are you making out, Sam, with everything that's going on?
Well, first of all, Robbie's a great guy, Tom, and I appreciate it. I know I've seen you before as well. Your face looks very familiar. I'm glad that we finally get a chance to talk. Okay, that's important. Um, I mean, we're all going along well. I think the fact is that we we share the community with about 800 people that are in the small business community in this county that I'm familiar with through my memberships and various social clubs that I belong to. And like everyone is hurting. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a real time of uncertainty for everybody. But I think the thing that I tell people is that I remember um, 2009, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, and let me tell you, this is nothing like 2009, 10, 11, and 12. This is like a walk in the park for I think for a lot of businesses, only because there's a time certain issue. Okay, in other words, okay, we're all suffering badly. All right, employees are suffering, um, business owners are suffering, but we know that this is a short-lived event, right? I mean, it could be 2 months, could be whatever. By I tell people by June, I think this would have been history. So the survival question is not one like it was in 11. When we were looking at surviving in 11, we didn't know how long the recession would last, and we really didn't think anybody's going to make it. Okay. Um, I have an anecdotal.
But we
Anecdotal.
know that this is a short-lived event, right? I mean, it could be 2 months, could be whatever. I tell people by June, I think this would have been history.
So I
So
just got a lot of
the
feedback.
question is not one
Yeah.
like it was in 11. When we were.
You hearing that, Tom?
Yeah, I think I is that gone now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I hear a clicking. I don't know what that is.
So yeah, I don't know. There's no clicking around here, but I remember we used to have as business owners, at least I did, prior to 2011. I used to have a cash surplus where we could cover a lot of our bills and all our employees for probably a period of 3 years. Okay, in terms of a cash cushion, that's a pretty healthy balance sheet for any business. Um, but in 2011, um, I actually probably 2009 and 10 when the banks called all our loans and everybody was calling everybody, and vendors weren't paying us, and customers had disappeared, and renters had basically stopped paying rent, and they didn't care because we wanted to keep the places occupied, so we didn't care. um, we were down to a 3-day cash cushion, which means I used to wake up on a Monday and wonder how we used to get bills paid on a Wednesday, right? So that was a pretty dramatic fall from a 3-year cushion to a 3-day cushion, right? um, this particular event, while it's taken its toll on a lot of people, I think the feds have done a remarkable job of at least putting a cushion in for the middle class, the working class, right? The people that actually have jobs. I mean, the stimulus checks, although we haven't seen any yet, are on their way. That's great news. The fact that they have automatically written forbearance into their rent without even having so much to, having to fill out a form is also great for a lot of people. The fact that banks are very liquid means that this will be a short-lived event. Nobody's going, no banks are pulling loans. Uh, so I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, and all we've got to do now is get through it, right? That's the difference, I think, fundamentally between what we've gone through in a recession and this particular event, which I think is going to be short-lived, but it's still going to hurt a lot of people.
What do you think about there's people every time I post something that's positive, I'm a conspiracy theorist. And it's crazy. No matter what, if we ask questions about this in any way, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. And it seems to me that the side that hates Trump wants disaster and wants people to die because it makes the POTUS look bad. But And the other way, to me, you know, and I don't really like necessarily want to give one side the benefit of the doubt or the other, but it seems to me that the Republican side is you know, they're not necessarily biased, they're just kind of being honest about things, and the other side just wants to sensationalize this. What are your thoughts on that aspect of it?
My personal thoughts are, I think, you know, there's a wide gap between reality and being a conspiracy theorist. Okay, but people are making that jump pretty easily on the liberal side. They're saying, you know, if you understand reality and you question reality, okay, as you say, you're automatically labeled a conspiracy theorist, right? Um, I think there's room for improvement on both counts for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that the anti-Trumpers are actually almost wishing that this would extend into the November elections. Okay, because they know that if this disaster had taken place or would continue to take place through the course of the elections, that Trump would face a very tough chance at re-election. Okay, and that's really the only hope they have. The hope that they have, and they've said it, they've been publicly articulating this for 3.5 years, is crash the economy. Okay, well, congratulations, you know, the economy has crashed. Okay. Um, but at the same time, I think the fact is that we're right to question some of the numbers and some of the models that have been produced. Okay. At the same time, I don't think that we can call it a conspiracy, and the reason that I personally don't think that way is because it's affected, you know, 180 countries. Okay, now if it was narrow in scope, and you know, we found that it only affected, say, the protesters of Hong Kong and the United States, okay, because that's where the viruses, you know, basically were distributed for some reason, then obviously it becomes, you know, proof in the pudding that, you know, this was a man-made event. But I really think what's happened here is that we've taken an event which is natural in cause, okay, and we hit the panic button prematurely. And I really think all of us did that unintentionally, okay, because we were being given models that were like, okay, this is the, you know, the Black Plague type models, okay. And I think also Trump realized pretty early on that he needed to take steps, but the seriousness of those steps that he took um, were exaggerated. The reason he took them is because I think he was given models just like we were that were highly exaggerated. Okay, so now here we are a month and a half later, or 2 months later, um, where the models are being put back into reality. And so we're now, I think there's a much more vocal contingency of those people that are questioning the steps that were taken, like the serious steps that were taken to crash this economy, over what is turning out to be probably uh, something similar to H1N1, okay, which is, you know, wasn't a, I mean, yes, it was a tragic issue, but in the overall scope of deaths and flus and everything else, it was about average, right? So I'm not a virologist, I can't tell, but I do know that our final numbers are going to be probably in the 1% or less than 1% area in terms of mortality rate. So I think it's the whole process should be questioned. But I think the fact that it's affected 180 countries doesn't, you know, in my opinion, means that this was really a widespread natural event rather than, I think people are taking advantage of it, you know, on the other side, because they want this to happen. They, you know, they really feel like this is the only chance of Trump getting out of office. So I think it's a disaster both ways, that way.
Yeah. What was crazy to me is the World Health Organization and how they are in bed with China, it seems, and how they do not seem to have the world's health in mind when they're doing anything. It just seems to me that there's a lot of shady things happening with the WHO, the CDC, you know, and everything else. What are your thoughts on that, on the World Health Organization?
So, you know, it's like anything else. I mean, I'm not a globalist by any stretch of the imagination. I do business with Europe all day long. I mean, I bring, you know, my primary business is a European business, a European-based business. Okay, so at the end of the day, we work with Europe all day long. But at the end, but we really have to understand that these organizations like the UN and like WHO are globalists in nature, right? They're funded by globalists. They basically have a bunch of liberal think tank globalists that work with them, and they all believe in this one world government. Everybody comes together under the same rules, generally socialist rules, whether you have a ruling elite class, okay, and a working class. I mean, that's really the only two classes in socialism, right? You've got the elite class, and then you've got the rest of your asses, right? So I really think that these things are so far permeated into these organizations like WHO and also like the UN, that that is the process that they're going to use to pander to or be pacifistic towards those companies and those countries that fund them, right? I mean, so it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how bad you are, as long as you're funding us and you're giving, you're jointly going along with us in terms of a one world government type organization, then we're going to cover up your black marks, right? And that's what's happening with WHO. I think WHO has a lot of explaining to do with respect to China. I think the UN has a lot of explaining to do as to how they put countries like Iran and China on the Human Rights Council. I mean, it's like we're living in a Monty Python show, right? I mean, in reality, as you look at it and you shake your head and you say, now, how the hell are you guys actually doing making these decisions? And the liberals actually accept it and say, this is like par for the course. It's like, oh, okay, we're all globalists, so we're going to accept it. But I got to be honest with you, I shake my head and I wonder, what the hell are these people thinking when they do this kind of stuff? It's kind of weird.
That's what I think has shocked me the most is how freely people have been willing to give up their civil liberties. Not only give up their own civil liberties, but to basically, demonize anybody that questions that happening. When I start seeing, them saying that they're going to arrest people for violating stay-at-home orders and they're going to put them in jail with no bail, those sort of things, scare me. When they start telling people, that they have to do certain things like close their business, and they have to wear a mask. These are things that, we're in trying times, but these are the things that we fight for, daily, weekly as Americans to keep these freedoms that in other countries people don't have. What are your feelings on how easily people have, gone that way? And I feel like it's almost like a move towards they want socialism.
Yeah. The judicial system is between a rock and a hard place. Okay. I was shocked when I saw a federal judge basically support the I'll arrest you if you step out of the house type order. Okay. And they're talking about putting, there's now, I believe there's a city that mandated the requirement of wearing masks as you go out in public, as part of an order that is that can be, that you can be arrested for. So what's scary to me is you've got the judicial system, which is really the final arbiter, right? I mean, you've got to stop at the Supreme Court. I mean, it doesn't go further than that with respect to some of these civil liberties that are being taken. But there's also precedent and there's also information that they have to look at, right? So in my opinion, they're between a rock and a hard place, because if this was, let's assume this was the Ebola virus. Okay, let's assume that we were all now in the, this thing that took place 25 years ago in Virginia where Ebola almost got out in the United States. Let's assume that we're using that scenario as an example, right? So when you're facing a mortality rate of 80%, okay, on a virus that's easily transmittable, all right, and can spread like wildfire, then I think you have to somehow contain that fire. It is a wildfire. And I think you have to basically cross the lines of certain civil liberties on a temporary basis. But I think the courts have to be very careful with respect to the impact of some of these laws, okay, with being reasonably constraining versus the alternative of spreading the virus everywhere that you walk if you're Ebola positive, right? So at the end of the day, I think there has to be a balancing act between the civil liberties that we're giving up during times of crisis, okay? It has to be temporary in nature, and I think the courts have to take a very close look at it, versus those that we're giving up based on bad modeling, okay? So now what has happened is these guys came to us with the panic button and said, you're all going to die. Okay, basically, you step out of the house. I mean, I've never seen my kids so scared of a virus in my life. I mean, it's like we've lived through a bunch of viruses, right? So, but I've never seen the level of hysteria and panic in these kids that I see today. I mean, I haven't seen my kids in 3 weeks, okay, because they put me in quarantine until I'm completely clean and so forth, which, by the way, is tomorrow, okay? So the bottom line is that the courts are the final arbiter. I think they have to base their decisions on what they're getting from the scientific community, okay? And I think the scientific community is feeding them bullshit. So at the end of the day, you've got this judge that is getting information from this community that says that we're all going to die, okay, if you step out of your house. So what do? Okay. Well, he's not a virologist. The court guy, the judge can't sit there and question. It's up to the plaintiffs or the defendants to basically question each other's models, right? And that's not being done here, because all the scientific models that were being used were all pointing to this, high mortality rate virus. So I think at the end of the day, you obviously, at times of crisis where there's lives in danger, probably have to curb some civil liberties in order to save the nation. Okay, but in this case, I think it's almost a test run for BS, because anyone that understands the fact that people are not lining up and dying on the streets. I mean, if I was a judge, obviously, I'd look at reality as a model, right? I'd say, well, okay, I understand that, you've got these models showing 2 million dead in the United States, but I'm not seeing any hospitals, frankly speaking, being overrun. So let's question the model, right? I don't think that started happening yet, but I think it will. I think within the next week or two, there should be enough reality setting in with respect to real numbers that everybody in the system will start questioning why we did what we did in terms of destroying an economy. And I think the judicial system is going to take note of that as well. And I think a lot of these orders that are curbing civil liberties may end up being overturned when it gets to some sort of a judicial interference. So we'll see what happens. But there's always a balance. I mean, if it was, like I said, if it was a death-defying Ebola panic going on right now in the States, then you could see where you can try to constrain a person to his house if he's got Ebola, right? I mean, you don't want to walk around the malls and spreading the crap. So there has to be some balance, but this certainly isn't the case to do it with.
Understood. And on the flip side of that, is it possible that these precautions that I've made have changed those models, so to speak, so dramatically, or have we been fed, an inflated, model initially, almost like, when people create a business plan with blue sky projections that they're never ever going to hit, and then the reality comes out and it's so much lower, but at the same time, it's caused a reaction by whether it's the financial community, which stops investing for some reason. And it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy on one end, whereas with this, maybe the precautions have changed that model. Do you think that's the case, or do you think it's really that we were fed poor information?
Well, I think anytime that you lose, anytime you take information that is incorrect, okay, and you basically use it to establish a new precedent when it comes to anything, right? You've now opened up that Pandora's box of new precedents, right? So now, no matter what happens, whether the model was exaggerated or is real, the fact is that we've given up a lot of our civil liberties as a result of whatever information was being fed to us, right? So it makes it easier the next time.
Yep.
So, I kind of look at it this way. I mean, it's you don't want to give up an inch when it comes to civil liberties. I mean, you should really. People have fought, given their lives. I mean, let's face it, civil liberties in this country it's the only country in the world where where I felt safe. Okay, as an immigrant, as a human being, right? I mean, any other country that I've lived in, basically, unless you were in the ruling class, and my family history is we used to be the ruling class of one country, but during the revolution we all got killed, right? So at the end of the day. This is the only country that I've come to as an immigrant that I felt very secure because of the protection of my civil liberties, right? So when we've given up the right to walk outside, or when we've given up the right to walk in a park, or as I saw some of these arrests being done in some of the counties somewhere where people on boats are being arrested, for violating some sort of an order, even though they're out in the middle of the Gulf or whatever it is. I mean, these are ridiculous liberties to have been given up over this model, but it's made it easier now for the next one, right? So, I mean, we gave it up so easily, okay, don't go outside, fine. I mean, don't drive around, don't gather more than 10 people or whatever. It's what it is, but it makes it easier for the next time. And I think we have to fight for every inch because people are giving their lives for us to, maintain the Constitution. And I think we gave it up too easily this time around. I really do.
So just kind of a little off question. To me, the political parties are insanely divided now, more than ever, it seems. And I feel like the Democratic Party has changed immensely. What are your thoughts on the parties and the difference, and whether or not to me the Democratic Party seems like they are insane, and they want communism or they want socialism? Has it always been that way, or What happened to make that change?
So, I've been involved in politics in this town for 35 years, right? I mean, I started in the 90s, and I remember when this county, particularly Hillsborough County, was completely was completely isolated, right? I mean, it was like we had a blue county back in the 1990s, and I saw a lot of policies going through that were really just really bad policies for those of us that were in business or that were conservative. Things changed. Now, when I started getting involved in politics, I used to take advantage of what we call the primary vote, right? The primary vote basically is either the left side or the right side of the spectrum that comprises of about 25 to 30% of the individual respective party, okay? That brings a nominee to the table for the general election, right? That's the way it works. You work up the primary vote. It's a small contingent of people that basically nominate somebody to represent them in the general election, right? That's how the process works. And what I used to find is an overall scheme of things, this fringe element, what I used to call the fringe elements of both parties, the right wing radicals and the left wing radicals, comprise of about 23% overall of the party, okay, of their respective party. Now, what's happened is, what I found is the Republican fringe element, okay, has remained pretty static at 23%, although a lot of people now identify as a Trump individual, in the Republican Party, that believe in the straightforward talk and the real life values of President Trump, okay. But the fringe element stayed at 23%. The guys that are really radical, right? I mean, the guys that really just believe in all sorts of radical stuff. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm saying there's their beliefs stayed at that minority contingency. What I saw on the left side, though, is I saw this fringe element go from 23% to now almost 40%, right, of the party. So what's happened is socialism, which is their fringe element, and I'm talking communism being very small, but socialism really, the liberal progressive class, right, has gone from being a fringe element of around 23% to almost 40% progressive. Now, what's happened is the reason they've done that is because a vast majority of the voters, the young voters, are getting engaged, right? So in this county, for instance, what really hurt us in this county in terms of being conservative is the growth around, University of Tampa and University of South Florida. The growth pattern that took place around these two areas, turned us back into a blue county because the progressive kids, the kids that are taught these liberal think tank values their entire life, their educational life, okay, come out as voters, they register, and they're a progressive. So this socialistic fringe model has gone from in the 20% to in the 40% of the Democratic Party. So it has changed significantly. A lot of Democrats are not comfortable in this envelope. They've got to live with the fact that almost 4 out of 10 of their registered voters are now very comfortable in this envelope. And a lot of people say that there's such a stark difference between the two parties in terms of values that this should be an easy election for Trump, right? But it's not going to be. I mean, people don't realize that no matter how you look at it, there's such a divisive hatred for this one individual of our party, okay, of the Republican Party, that you've actually got guys swallowing the theory of socialism, okay, that don't believe in it, just to vote against this guy in office. They'll take, they'll say, we'll take whatever is on this, no matter how bad it is, because we hate this guy, right? They're not looking at the right. They hate Trump that bad. So now you've got this contingent of socialists, which, by the way, is still a minority in their party, because obviously Bernie Sanders didn't make it, right? So you still have 60% of the people that said, okay, well, we're not going to allow a socialist to be a head of the party, but they're okay with socialistic values as part of their platform because they hate Trump so much, right? So they're willing to give up a lot of individual rights and what this country was founded on just to get this one guy out of office. And it's a tragedy, because it's that's when you look at what Trump is doing for the United States, what he's doing is what we should have done 20 years ago and for the last 20 years by our party, which is bring American wholesale values back to us, right? Manufacturing, Constitution, all that good stuff. So it's unfortunate, but this is what the educational liberals have been. I mean, everything for the last 30, 40 years have been based on these think tank globalists from high school on forward, and we're paying the price now. You've got a huge plurality of the party of their side that just don't understand what socialism is, and they think it's the panacea of happiness. And let me tell you, I've been through socialism. It doesn't work. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Pete, I see you in the backstage there. I'm going to bring you on soon. Don't worry. So I have your brother Robbie, who has a few of thoughts that he wants to bring on, and I'm going to bring him on right after. So I see you there, Pete. Don't worry. Bringing up that fact, I heard that the pastor, and I'm sure Pete will have, some comments about that, is going to hold his church again this Sunday.
Brown?
Easter Sunday, the one that was arrested.
Ronald Brown.
Yeah, I believe that's his name, correct? I heard he was planning on having Easter Mass. Have you heard any of that, or what do you think about that situation?
So there were so many better ways of handling the situation, and sheriff's a friend of mine, and I'm not going to criticize him. Okay, but in hindsight, the fact is that I think Pastor Brown, again, remember, we were dealing with some bad models, okay? And we were all suffering as a result of those bad models. And, I had to shutter one of my businesses as well with 65 employees, basically had to furlough them on the 28th of March because of the shutdown order, right? And so we're all hurting. And so I looked at the story when Pastor Brown was arrested, and I said, boy, there are so many better ways of handling this, right? First of all, what Pastor Brown did, frankly, is he took good precautions. He indicated that he had sanitizer, he had the filtration system, he had people separated by family rather than individual, which I guess is okay, because if you're living with family, you're living with family, right? I mean, you come to church as a family group, you guys are exposed to the house. There's no difference. And he had them separated apparently by distance, 6 foot between families and so forth. Although the photograph didn't show it, and I think the photograph might have been, something in the archives by the press that they used rather than reality. But I think this was such an overreaction to his actions that it really upset me. All right, because this is not what our sheriff is like. I mean, I don't know what or why he would take this dramatic step and then make it a press conference and everything else, and then have two pastors from different churches, and then the state attorney who who's just a complete liberal. I mean, the guy believes in releasing everybody from jail. It just is a really bad presentation of protecting our rights, right? In hindsight, what I would have done is what they've done in this county in the past when they've had an entity not respond to some sort of an order, okay, because they have immunity of some kind, is you can block the roads. I mean, if you really want to stop Pastor Brown from holding a church service, okay, those roads belong to the county. And if he was really a danger to the community, okay, and let's assume it was an Ebola type situation where somebody wanted to get together in the church and spread the Ebola virus because they believe it's some message from God or whatever it is, you block the roads. I mean, we have the right to block the roads in the county. If it was that enforceable, that's the way it should have been done, right? You don't arrest a guy for holding a church service. It is the worst thing you can do in terms of crossing the line between, church and state, in my opinion. And I'll tell you, there's no way that any appeal will hold up this order in the sense that in the way that he was arrested. I don't think it'll ever pass any judicial ruling.
And I think everybody noticed when the stay-at-home order was issued that it did not include churches or houses of worship. They are allowed to still congregate as long as they're doing it under the rules. I was out in St. Pete yesterday, and the local sheriff has a big yellow notice sign that's on businesses' doors, basically, saying the rules, but permitting them to be open. I was in a medical marijuana dispensary, and actually there were people sitting in there. There were 4 or 5 people. So they are letting people go into other businesses, obviously. And I believe that the state was right in excluding houses of worship in the stay-at-home order, and allowing some, because we have more, as you know, right here in Valrico. Go down Lithia Pinecrest Road. There's probably 7 or 8 churches here that are small congregations that are now allowed to meet this coming Sunday, from what I understand.
Yeah, and again, I think the fact that this model was used, this bad modeling was used for this particular epidemic, and it's now created, it's actually revealed a lot of crap that I think we can take a look at, and have some clarity for, so that we can take some of this back, some of these civil liberties that were taken advantage of back into the envelope of security like we should. Like, for instance, I think if if we have a successful election on our side, I think we can pass some ordinances to say this kind of behavior, just, this behavior from the sheriff on an order, or the way that the order came through. Keep in mind that this order came through in a very stupid manner, right? I mean, there was virtually no discussion between the word order or directive. There was no rhyme or reason for the list that was given in terms of exempt, essential and non-essential. And it was just, 5 or 6 people on a panel that basically had no discussion with respect to a stay-at-home order. It was based on Jane Castor's edict that, hey, I'm going to take the New York, LA, and Chicago route, the 3 worst run cities in the world, okay, literally. And I'm going to use their example because I've been talking to their mayors. And the rest of us, in the county just kind of rolled over for this. I mean, we had people just rolling over on the word directive versus order, and that there's an enforcement action with the word order. And I think people on our side of the county that were representing us, or that were supposed to represent us, should have objected to that, because this was a bad situation when you start arresting people for holding worship services, particularly when they've taken precautions with respect to the model that's out there. So I think we've learned a lot.
Our First Amendment right to assemble, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what some are saying is that the states have a right to override that, and the counties have a right to override that. And I think that's where we have a real big mess, at least here in the state of Florida, not just with this situation, but with other things. Even the medical marijuana community, there's certain counties that have banned, the implementation of the state law, on the local level. And, we're seeing different cities, I guess, exert, their rights, overriding whether it's state or federal.
Yeah, obviously, the rule of law is very simple, right? I mean, the organization that sits above you in the hierarchy basically gets to control the law that you work under, right? That's just the way it's always worked. So, but the cost of getting something overturned is pretty significant, right? I mean, you can't just go to court. I've learned this pretty quickly. You can't just go to court and think that this is going to be an easy process, right? It's going to cost you tens, 50s, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do anything to overturn an ordinance or a law that you think is unlawful. So at the end of the day, you've got to rely on those types of organizations that fight on the behalf of, our constitutional rights. But we're slaves to them, right? Because we can't individually go out and say, I want to fight this order. So I think we get rolled over as a population, as a general population. We get rolled over a lot, and I think that's why elections matter, because the people that you put in office to represent you should understand they represent your value system, right? And so if the opposing team wins, then you have no choice but to live under their umbrella of whatever rule of law they want to put forth. And that's why I think elections are important. That's why I think this county, unfortunately, being lost now, becoming a blue county, we're going to see some real serious violations with respect to both higher taxes in terms of our economic freedoms. And I also think they're going to, as you've seen in this latest order, curb some civil liberties, and because of their general philosophical leaning towards the left. So, I mean, these guys were so quick to act. It was just, I found it astounding, just absolutely amazing that they were so quick to act to pass this ordinance,
Yeah.
It was really sad.
Pete, I'm going to bring you on real soon. I know we only have you for a few more minutes, Sam, but, I just want to put it out there. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I actually voted for Obama twice. And under the recent, situation, I'm switching parties myself. I actually put that in. I did vote, for Trump. I did. And I've looked at this objectively from both sides, and I try to look at it logically. I'm a biohacker. I'm a business hacker. I like to try and break things apart and put them back together and see where all the pieces have fallen. And being in the cannabis space for the last 5 years, I've been really associated with a lot of very liberal, very open, and people wanting all these new rights, but I'm very surprised by a lot of the stances that people have taken. And I'm going to bring Pete on. He has some strong stances. This Pete's Robbie's brother after you. But before you end, is there anything that you can say that I think we're getting rid? There's no blue and red anymore. We're really kind of logical. Where I don't identify with either party anymore, but I don't identify with the major liberalism either. Where do people like me fit nowadays in your opinion, Sam?
Well, I mean, frankly, I think you fit in the Trump party, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think Trump is exactly what we're looking for, which is basically he's not right, he's not left, he'll work with anybody, and he'll work with some of these personal freedoms. You talk about marijuana, medical marijuana, and so forth. I mean, these are philosophies that the Republican Party traditionally would stay away from, right? But at the end of the day, I think Trump understands the reality of human life, and if medical marijuana works, why not, right? I mean, let's just do
Right
it.
to try. He
So
came out with right to try, obviously.
yeah, right to try. So I think the fact is that there is a third party, and I really think that third party has taken away a lot of the moderates from both parties and said, this guy's an American. I mean, at the end of the way, we are the American party rather than the Republican, the Democratic Party. We believe in the values of the American system and the American rule of law. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now whether you're a D or an R. I think you just either are, in my opinion, an American that believes in the constitutional rule of law, okay, or one that wants to be a globalist. And I think that's the two parties that we've got now. We've got the globalist party, and then we've got the patriotic party, right? So I think what you're seeing is you're seeing a shift in these two paradigms to identify either as a guy that is a nationalist, and I am, by the way, even though I'm an immigrant, I believe in nationalistic laws because I think we have to protect our country, okay, and home rule, versus someone that believes us as being part of a much bigger melting pot that then basically liquidates the core value system of what this your country was founded on. So at the end of the day, I think we're just going to be two parties. It's going to be a globalist party or a nationalistic party. And I think Trump represents the way forward if we're going to regain some of the fundamental core value systems that we started this country with, or you did anyway. I didn't. I was a visitor, and I appreciate you guys letting me in. So I've got to run because the market's open. But I appreciate very much the opportunity to speak to both of you guys, and I hope that one day we get back to rolling, Robbie, at some point, because awesome. I'm getting fat and out of shape, and I don't like it one bit.
I've been fat and out of shape, unfortunately, but Sam, thanks so much for taking the time. Once you come out of quarantine, if you ever want to stop by, I think you know where I'm at. I'm on Lithia Pinecrest Road, my wife's new coffee shop. We opened up during the pandemic, which
love it. Yeah, it's bad timing, but love it. Yeah,
the old T. Marie's is on Lithia and Bloomingdale. So
I'll look forward to it.
All right, thanks so much, Sam. I'm going to bring you now.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Pete was pulling out his hair out backstage, and I've seen his arms flying a few times.
Dude, I had questions for Sam.
Good morning.
He had all this stuff to say. He didn't know what to say anything back.
Now's your opportunity.
But he has no opportunity to reply to anything. I have questions for him. Like, I want to know why he thinks that these models were bad. Where's the evidence of the models being bad? Like, I don't know where that came from. I don't understand what that means. Like, the models are bad. Why? Because it's not like, why? How did we see that? How is this similar to H1N1 when people are dying? People that I know, like, and not like it's far-fetched. Like, this is a SARS virus. Like, where are you getting that information from? How is it inflated? There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about, especially when it comes to civil liberties. I mean, like, the way I see things, I see the world, I see science, right? I see this is the way nature is. This is the things that happen. And we have to, as a society, have to adapt around that, right? We have to figure out things around that nature, things that are happening. And that is society. That's our construct. That's our civil liberties, our governments, or the way we interact with each other. But when it comes to something that's literally a virus that's killing people, what does that have to do with it? Like, what do your civil liberties have to do with it if the virus is true, if it's not, made up or inflated numbers or used as a way to control people, if that's actually happening and killing people, what difference does it make if you have civil liberties?
I think Pete screwed. I think we lost him for a second there. I know Pete has some really strong.
My phone rang.
There you go.
That's the way I keep you quiet. I just
Did I lose? I lost audio and shit again. Motherfucker.
No, you're good.
We can hear you.
God,
so can everybody else.
Yeah, we got you.
We got you. He's gonna have to sign off and come back. But I think Sam brought up a lot of real good points. And I know where Pete's going with nature, but I've also heard. Again, I like to look at it from both sides. I like to adjust my opinion based on new information that comes out. That's how I actually went towards looking at marijuana as I was against marijuana my entire life until something affected me personally that new information changed my point of view. And here's Pete back right now. So, I go with the fact of new information that comes out, judging decisions or opinions based on new information as it's released or as it's verified, so to speak, that's out there. And I do think some of the models were wrong, Pete. Unfortunately,
why do you think that they're wrong?
Well, don't we not know the denominator still, like how many people are actually infected? And then from what I understand, they're making people, they're classifying people as dying of coronavirus when they didn't actually die of coronavirus.
But are you talking about dying of getting hit by a car and having coronavirus, or dying of a heart attack that can be induced by this virus that attacks your heart?
No, well, there was a story about a baby in Connecticut and how they, these hospitals want funding, or the states want funding from the federal government, so they're inflating them.
And they're also
want funding. Like, that is such speculation right there, though. Don't you think that's speculation? They want funding. It's like, okay, it sounds plausible, but it's like, where does that story come from? How do you know that that's remotely true?
Well, how do you know
that hospitals are lying about the numbers to get funding? You know what I mean? Like, there's no evidence. I don't see any evidence of that other than, well, it sounds like it makes sense,
Well, I mean, they had that one was that baby in Connecticut who they said died of coronavirus, when in fact the baby was suffocated at home, and then they labeled the baby dying of coronavirus.
We also had
it was shown that they wanted it, that the motivation behind that was to get funding, like they arrested someone,
I don't necessarily know the motivation, but I mean,
right.
One that's plausible, it sounds like, but the numbers are not accurate. And
how do you figure?
There's a 98% recovery rate, correct?
Right. If you say a 98% recovery rate, that implies a 2% mortality rate, which means 2% of the people that get it are going to die, which is huge. That's millions of people. So then you have to look at the infection rate and how many people are going to get it. And the projections, the steep projections were saying 80% if nobody did anything, right? So if you stay away from each other and you stop shaking hands and stop doing all this stuff, that infection rate comes down, right? And then you're able to mitigate the loss of life because 2% of a lower number, right? So that's assuming that 98% survival rate sticks, so that 2% mortality rate sticks. I think it's going to drop. I don't think it's going to be that high. I think that mortality rate will be more like 1%, which is still a lot of people. But you have to make sure that people don't get infected, because 1% of everyone is a lot of fucking people.
Now Fauci just came out and said that people should never shake hands ever again. So
no, that was his opinion.
Yeah, I know.
I think.
I'm just saying, but what if they came out with a law that nobody could ever shake hands again? Are we all okay with that? Because it will transmit the flu, will transmit any other, communicable diseases. Are we okay with making it illegal to shake hands?
I think that's an extreme scenario. And I think if there was, so in that extreme scenario, you would have to have an extreme disease or something happening, like an extreme situation for that to be happening. So yes, if there was a disease that was out there that we had no vaccine for, that it had a 50% mortality rate, like half the people that get it die, and the only way to stop it was to keep people from touching each other, yeah, you got to make it illegal. You know why you got to make it illegal? Because people are not responsible. People won't do it on their own. I wish that they were. I'm a libertarian at heart. I want people to be able to do whatever they want, right? And I want them to be responsible. When I was in high school, I used to wear patches on my jacket. And I had a patch that said anarchy. It was an anarchy patch. And one guy, just like this burnout guy one day was like, well, you know what that means? And I was like, I don't know, like no law. Because I was cool. I was in high school. I was like, no law, right? And he was like, you know what comes with anarchy? He was like, responsibility. And for some reason that stuck in my head. And I looked it up and stuff like that. And it's exactly what I'm thinking about right now. It's like, we shouldn't have to even be talking about a minister that's holding church service, because people should not be holding church service, because they should understand that it's dangerous. But unfortunately, we have to threaten people with stupid freaking, arresting them to get them to do something that is going to protect everyone. Now, when it comes to libertarians, like the whole thing is like, the right to swing my arms ends at your nose. When it comes to this, right, that's where, all these people are swinging. It's not those people that are at the church service that are going to be hurt. It's the people that they go out and interact with because they think that they're safe and they're not infected and God's going to protect them. The guy literally said that, So it's like, that's the problem, is they're hurting other people, not just themselves.
I went into,
So,
but I went into Publix yesterday. I went into Walmart and I went into Ace Hardware. By the way, Ace Hardware was freaking completely packed. I guess everybody except for me is doing a home project, right now. And I've seen more people out in these places recently. And yes, it says 6, but nobody's that. And I asked the people at Publix, I said, have any of your employees, gotten ill from this? And none of them have. So why are we assuming that the people that are going to church are ill or are going to spread this any more so than the people that are traveling to the grocery store?
And
I don't think it's any more so.
So,
but what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to keep people? It's a logistics thing.
Well,
It's
they
a necessity
in other countries, they let one member of your family leave to go to the grocery store a week. And if they take the temperature and it's high, they quarantine them and do not let them go back to their family. So,
I hope it doesn't get to that point. That's not a
you
bad
think
idea.
that would be okay here, though?
Do I think it would be okay? What do you mean by okay?
Like
think
if
we
you
should
went
do
out
it, or
to
you
the
think people
store-
would react badly?
Yeah, if you went to the store and you left Colleen at home and you went to pick up
Right.
provisions and they took your temperature, would you be okay with them quarantining you for 15 days away from your house?
If you went to the store and they took your temperature, and it depends on the severity of the situation that's going on. I mean, if you think about it, if in certain situations you might have to do that, it's almost like, think of it like war. What if we got invaded? All right, you're not allowed to go to the store anymore. Everybody got to stay in their house. Are you going to give up your civil liberties? Because you know what I'm saying? Like the situation is going to dictate whether that's okay or not. So if the situation is that severe, where people are getting this and sick and dying, or if it's like measles or it's that infectious, yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's what you have to do. Take your temperature before you go to the store to make sure you don't get quarantined.
What do you think, Robbie?
I think that they still don't know how many people are infected because of the lack of testing.
100%.
You can go get the flu easy, but what if the case is that a whole shitload of people are infected and the percentage is way low? We don't know that. We don't actually know how deadly this virus actually is. I can have it right now and not have any symptoms. So if it ends up being way less deadly than 1%, what does that mean? Does that mean that we should crash the economy? What about the people that are going to die of suicide and the mass depression? What about that? And also the fact that people maybe aren't going to listen. Maybe this isn't working.
Now I'm going to say something a little bit crazy as well. What if they find out that a group of people have an immunity based on a certain blood type or background, or just like sickle cell anemia? Certain people from certain countries are more susceptible to that. So what if they segregate our community and they say, oh, these people are allowed out, but you know what? You people that we know that fit in this other category, you're restrained.
This is something no one's been able to tell me okay, what if we were to have taken the immunocompromised and had them stay away from everybody else, and that was more what they were pushing, and everybody else developed herd immunity, the young, the healthy, and also, well, I know you agree with me with this, why are they not pushing any type of health? Why are they not pushing to strengthen your immune system? Because technically this is our immune system attacking us.
Well, I think that they are kind of pushing the immune system thing, but the problem is that the models that they're looking at for the people that have died from the disease. So they were saying that older people, immunocompromised, and smokers were like really susceptible to this, right? So that information was coming out of China, where we had people that were older and smoking. So in China, for instance, more men, right, got affected, so it was skewing towards men, right? So women weren't as affected as much, but they found out because that was because more men smoked. So I think as the virus spreads, more risk factors are becoming into play, and we're seeing it affect different types of people. So younger people in America are getting more affected because we have more obese people in America.
Right.
We have more young people that smoke and vape, right? We have more people that have underlying health conditions because of diet and things like that. Even, you know, this, like the people that even though they may look healthy, they have this shitty diet and they have high blood pressure and stuff and these underlying conditions. So it's hard to say if you're immunocompromised or not, because, you know, a lot of people are just overweight. They don't think that they're immunocompromised. They have all these underlying health conditions, and it becomes a problem. I think when we don't have the data to look at, to see, like, we don't have that data from China or from other places. We're looking at more from Italy now, because Italy has an aging and a smoking population that is huge, right? So once we start to see more of those factors, I think you don't want to go out and tell people that if you're under a certain age, you're kind of safe, because then those people may go out that have vaping disease or something like that, and they're going to get infected and have this false sense of security. You know what I'm saying? So you might get.
Don't you think that we as a species need to kind of accept that there's going to be loss of life? I mean, I understand. I don't want people to die. I'm not saying I'm not doing that, but we kind of should accept, like, hey, shit happens, and we're going to do our best to keep our civil liberties, and we're going to do our best, because that's important. If we crash the economy, other people are going to die. People don't even give that any applause.
We've already had some
people are going to kill themselves from this.
Yeah.
It's real. Those lives matter as well. So why it seems to be so imbalanced, the way that they're handling it, to me. And also, you asked about where Sam was getting the inflated numbers. Well, like we said, people are being diagnosed with COVID-19, and that's their death, when they don't actually have that. So that's where those numbers come from.
I know he's talking about the models, right? And he was talking about models that were cut.
We have the testing to actually know how many people.
I guess the first model said there would be 2 million people, and now the new one is 60,000 deaths. And now the new model.
Right, but the new models are based on our like you were saying before, our intervention actions that we're taking.
Is it?
So the new mod, the models that I were looking at were based on, you do nothing, this is what happens, and that was what everybody was basing it on. And then we started doing stuff, and by doing stuff, those models changed, and now we expect this many people to be infected because we're doing this stuff, right? So it's not like the models were bad, or they were inflated, or they were trying to scare people with them, or that the left wing wants to sensationalize. You know what? I want to make just like one little point about the sensationalism and media and stuff like that. And about extremism on the party sides. This is stuff that I wanted to address with Sam was, I think that you need to look at the media when it comes to this, and less at the political parties. So when I used to work in media, my radio network represented NBC, Fox, and CNN, and CBS, all of the news networks, every single one of them, right? And they were all trying to figure out what their angle was to try and get audience, right? We represented Bill O'Reilly, Fox News Radio, and Rachel Maddow, Air America, all of the liberals. So it was we all represented all of them, right? And they're all trying to find their audience. And anytime one of them tried to move to the middle of the audience, they dropped. Anytime CNN almost went out of business because they tried to be in the middle, right? They tried to be like pragmatists, like be in the middle. Dennis Miller had a radio show where he tried to be in the middle. He ended up going all the way to the right because nobody wanted to listen. Nobody listens to somebody who is moderate, who is reasonable. They listen to people on the extremes, extreme left, extreme right. And the more extreme you get, the more you push that way. And that's how we get someone like Trump that's a reality show kind of guy. He knows how to push those extremes. I can see exactly what he does. His books that I've read that illustrate marketing-wise exactly what he's doing when he says tremendous, first time, we've never done this before, all this shit, right? It's all strategic what he does. He's not a moron. He's really smart at doing this, right? But he's smart at manipulating people through the media, because he knows that that's where America is. America is into the media. and they will not listen to somebody like in the middle. Anybody that comes out that's not extreme, either they're not, Bernie got popular because he was so extreme and he was a character, he was like, and he was really left and he was socialist. And I don't think that they're like, that people are gravitating towards, they want to be socialist or something. They want to be, people are thinking, but they're being pulled in these two directions. And there's nobody like in the middle, right? Because people want that sensationalism.
Don't you think Trump's actually kind of in the middle from what Sam was saying as well? Like he's appealing to the middle.
I don't think Trump is in the middle at all. I don't think Trump has right wing, but I was going to ask, that's one of the things I want to ask Sam was, what do you think Trump's values are? Because I don't think that they are right wing, left wing at all. I think Trump values his brand, himself. He values money. He values his legacy. He values his family, right? Those are his values, not your family, not America. I don't believe that at one bit that Trump has these values. His values are for his popularity, and that's what's shown me. Like, I mean, it's evidenced in like his entire life story, and following it from the beginning, my parents were big fans of Trump in the 80s. It was like, I've known Trump for a long, like I've been watching that narrative for a long time. And I don't think he has like values that he's trying to put forward other than making himself look good. He wants his legacy to be good. He wants Trump everywhere. He wants to have that. He's Biff Tannen. He wants to have a legacy, right? And how he gets there is by getting popular. How do you get popular? Telling people what they want to hear, manipulating the masses, stuff like that. So that's what I feel like his agenda is. I don't think it's right wing or left wing. I just think he is he's the smartest person we've seen in media so far. And you look, I go back and watch him on WWE and WWF. It's fucking brilliant. I'm telling you, it's brilliant. He knows how to play people against each other. He knows how to make himself look like the champion of poor people, which is like amazing. That's like the greatest thing ever. I can't even imagine how that he was able to pull that off. Given his history of like evicting poor people and shit. Like if you grew up in New York, you like see this stuff. Like you see that even in the conservative newspapers would report on it, So it makes me a little crazy when I see like when people think that Trump has like these like values, or it's about like something deeper. I don't think it's about something deeper. I just think it's about Trump, the name, the word. He wants it to be in the vernacular, which it already is.
You said a couple of things that hold on.
Go ahead.
You said a couple of things there that I think really shine a light on what's happening in this country. Is the media is basically going so far to one extreme and getting that into the minds of I hate to call it sheep, or people that just are doing what they are listening to, and it's causing a division amongst our society, where people are hating each other for their point of view just because it's different than theirs. And I'm seeing it a lot more from the liberal side, hating the people that are supporting, whether it's the Republican Party or the Trump Party, or, I know Richard Lowe's on here right now. And a couple of weeks ago, he was in a restaurant and he was saying how he, supported our president to the bartender, and the other patron at the bar wrote on the receipt for the bartender, "Get your tips from the other Trump lover, your other Trump lovers." So literally took it out on his waiter or bartender at the bar because of their political views. So this division between it. How do we get people to look in the middle and start respecting each other's points of views again without really attacking each other? I guess is that the media's responsibility, or do we all have to take responsibility for that ourselves?
Oh no, I think social media gives people, gives everybody this voice. And what happens is, it's kind of happened in music too. You think it would be like this great thing that anybody can record an album in their house. Now you have everyone recording an album with their house, even people that suck. So it makes it harder to find the good stuff, right? It makes it harder to find because there's so much out there, right? So I think that, there's so many opinions, especially on social media, And it's easy to put yourself into an echo chamber where you're only looking at your own opinions. And that really is causing a lot of the divide where people really feel like they're in a tribe. Like, because people are tribal. People want to belong to something, a group of something. So they can do that on social media with points of view. And when they look at other people and they make them the other, right, it empowers them and their tribal feelings, and it strengthens that tribe. And they look at other people as, okay, they're the other. And that's a real problem, because we're all, like I was trying to say before, in this together when it comes to reality, when it comes to science, and not things that we've made up. You know, like, we've made up a lot of things, but some things just exist that we're discovering, right? Like, we didn't discover democracy. We made it up until we figure out something better, you know? So it's like we're discovering these things, and we all have to, when it comes to that, it's like Independence Day. Like, the whole world's got to kind of come together. We're talking about globalism and stuff. I'd love to have a whole other discussion about that. Like, why, like what's the theory behind nationalism? If the aliens came down, would we like break up into different countries and fight them? Or how would we, aren't we one planet? Aren't we like one kind of universe? Don't we have to have common goals? Like, if China decides to detonate a bunch of nukes to nuke its own people, right? It's their right to do that. It affects the entire planet. We'd have nuclear winter. We'd block out the sun. You know what I mean? There are global interests. I don't understand the whole nationalism thing. Nationalism is never, I don't know. It's always been kind of a negative word in my opinion. So I'd love to have that debate sometime. I digress to a point where I don't remember what I was talking about.
That's how we know we got the issue your nose, Pete.
Hey guys, I gotta take off, but thanks for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I got it too. You know, we're inching up on the 1 hour mark. I think we touched on a lot of things, but you know, my thing is you know, question things, ask questions. Don't just follow what you see on the news. You know, research things, take a look at it from both points of view. I think there's valid points on both sides, but you know, at the same time, I think, you know, that we're in a situation right now that's unprecedented, and it's scaring a lot of people, and it's forcing them to want to follow or believe what they're hearing at all costs, sometimes one way or the other. And you know, we need to question some of the things that are happening. My fear is this is going to set a precedent for the future, where, you know, and I bring up all these other deaths from other things for a reason. You know, what if all of a sudden driving a car is too dangerous to allow you to do, and we have to all get in automated vehicles because you know, some lobbyists that run AI and, you know, have the new vehicles that are coming out there want to implement that, and they lobby the government to do that. Or, you know, like Mayor,
that's going to happen.
Or Bloomberg, you know, making 32-ounce sodas illegal in New York City. You know, where do these
non-commercial traffic,
you know, these are the different things that scare me. You know, those type of things, and the fact that people in our country will just blindly say that's okay because it's protecting, you know, people that are too stupid to think for themselves. You know, whether it's, you know, that's how alcohol was in prohibition. You know, we have 88,000 people a year that are dying from alcohol-related deaths. You know, but we continue to promote and use alcohol and have bars and collect, you know, do all these different things, which I think it's a right. You know, I don't drink, you know, but if people want to drink themselves to death, they're allowed to. And I know it's different, but you know, they are destroying families. You know, when it's a father in a family and he has a wife and a bunch of kids, they're destroying the other people in the family, and we still allow that to happen. Well, that's it. I think I got to get ready because I got church this Sunday I got to go to. No, I'm just kidding. I did get invited to that church service, by the way. One of the parishioners was in here.
All right, guys, I got to go.
All right, guys. Robbie, come on by if you're home today. I'll be here all weekend. All right, you got it. All right, Pete, you want to add anything else? It's just me and you. Hey, on the morning show this morning, you said a couple of things that, you know, I don't know if you guys know this, but for those that don't wake up early enough, Pete does a 7:10 a.m. morning show every single day. He's got some great content on it. It's broadcast live on Grindr, Twitch. He's on a whole bunch of different platforms. So if you want to see him and Colleen bring up some good topics, but you know, he said something that, you know, we look for news articles that confirm in our mind hypothesis or thoughts that we have. And sometimes we seek out data or information. And I think that you're a big data guy. You've taught me a lot about data. And I think once we see the real data that comes out of this, and if they do subsects of it, like, how many people were men, women, blood types, their smoking, obesity, and we start seeing who was affected, then what we could do is we could start making plans for the future to help those susceptible type of people that were affected and that died from something like this, to do lifestyle changes, just like we do with other ailments that people come on. You find out diabetes, you stop, with sugar. So if we start seeing that there's a trend of obese males between 45 and 50 with blood type O were the dominant people that died during this epidemic, we may see in future epidemics that we need to do something to help those people make lifestyle changes. What do you think, Pete?
Well, the problem with viruses is that, like, the Spanish flu affected people in their 20s, like it killed off young people, so it's hard to determine what the next one is going to affect. But that's what all those researchers keep asking for funding for. And what's funny is that I was following that for the past 10 years, at least 10 years, about these viruses. I mean, I know I've told you, it was like, all our medicine's made in China. This is crazy. How can we allow this to happen?
It's archaic.
Those are the same people that were saying, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. We need funding to prevent this. And nobody would do it. They made a movie about it. Nobody would do it. I watched like a ton of TED Talks on it. Not even just Bill Gates. There's a bunch of TED Talks on it. And it's one of those things where you watch them on TV and you're like, yeah, that could happen. And my opinion is, and like, I guess I have faith in humanity. I'm always like, well, smart people are going to figure it out before this happens. Don't worry, smart people will figure it out before it happens. Don't worry. Just like, you see stuff like Yellowstone's supposed to, erupt at some point, the super volcanoes and stuff like, well, somebody smarter than me will figure out a way around it. And what happened to me is like, well, that didn't happen. Even through this whole thing with like this virus spreading, I was like, oh, they'll figure it out before it gets here, or they'll figure it out before it gets out of Italy, and it just didn't happen. So I think, they need a lot more, research. But just in when it comes to viruses and these types of things that can get out there, we need to be prepared for it. And it brings up the vaccination arguments and stuff, and what are the positives and negatives of vaccinations and herd immunity, and you don't want to see this stuff become a big problem. You don't want to see measles come back and stuff. And I know there's a lot of strong opinions on vaccines, so I don't want to necessarily go there. But when you're asking questions about stuff, you need to just make sure that those questions are based in science and they're based in, reputable sources. So when you're asking questions about, like, say, like the numbers didn't bear out, or you're asking questions about, like, for instance, hospitals are inflating numbers, it seems plausible. That's a really good leap, because it's like, oh, that makes sense. But there's no evidence to back that up. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I did hear that, because they're counting people twice. If they go to like a, one of these emergency places and they are then sent to the hospital, they're counting that person 2 times with COVID.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard that or looked into it, but what you should do is follow those numbers, follow that science. Don't just think that because something is plausible that might be the way it is. I've had a lot of, kind of experience discussing like conspiracies and stuff like that. And it's kind of like you look at things and you're like, well, yeah, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. But you have to look at like what's probable, what's the simplest explanation, things like that, because you can get carried away with a lot of things are possible and probable. A lot of things are like, it's very possible that people are trying to use this to manipulate things. So there's a possibility that people, are trying to inflate numbers to get more funding. It's not out of the realm of possibility that people are trying to exploit this epidemic. I mean, I've seen it already. There's people selling, fake test kits. I got an ad on Facebook for a fake test kit. I couldn't believe it.
By the way, did you see that YouTube thing where they set up in a town with tents?
Yes.
They were standing out, and then when they got confronted, they packed everything up and drove.
Yeah, they ran away.
Yeah. Like, so, we
actors,
talk about conspiracy theories, and I've been hesitant to talk about anything live online because I don't want it to be misconstrued with what we really believe, because sometimes, and I think everybody is doing this in their own homes and in their own communities, is talking about the different conspiracy theories that are out there. And maybe we should do another call or another, because I think that'll take a whole hour. But
it'll take more than an hour.
It's not a conspiracy theory though, if it's true though, right, Pete?
Well, it's not a theory if it's true. It's just a conspiracy. But it's beyond just conspiracies. It's just kind of like explaining things with magic, like there's an example, like there's a famous math equation, like for the origin of the universe, and it has all these math equations, and then it has in the middle a big circle. It says, and here a miracle happens, and this is how we explain everything. It's like you have to have data in order to make conclusions, and you can't just because something seems possible or probable or seems like it could be that way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is that way. And the other thing is, like, and I've talked to you about this many times, is the way you look at numbers. So because I worked for a long time in marketing and spin and PR, and the example I always give is the smoking numbers. So 90% of people that smoke, right? 90% of people won't get lung cancer, right? 90% of people that smoke will not get lung cancer, but 90% of people who get lung cancer are smokers.
Yeah.
So depending on which one of those facts you want to use depends on the story you want to tell, right? So everything's based on a story. Everything is us telling ourselves stories, telling other people's stories. So you want to tell a story that, oh, wow, that seems really 90% survival rate, no lung cancer. Everybody should smoke, right? But then you look at, well, how many people die of lung cancer, and nearly all of them got it from smoking cigarettes. It tells a completely different story. So you have to look at numbers.
And we haven't banned cigarettes. They've tried.
Yes. We haven't banned cigarettes, but we stopped advertising them. And I think we should stop advertising alcohol. I think that's ridiculous that we advertise alcohol to children from the time they're born. What do kids watch? They watch sports with their parents, so they bond over alcohol. Shouldn't be advertising alcohol and romanticizing it. It's a part of our culture. It's been part of culture forever. But you start glorifying it, and then that's when you start running into, problems,
Well, we could get into that as well. The liquor store next to me is full every day. And I know a lot of people are self-medicating for anxiety at home with alcohol, and then they're teaching their kids math. And so our future, math, the people that are running this country in the future, hopefully that doesn't happen for too much longer. Now, on the other hand, there's some really brilliant people that are probably teaching their kids way above the level that they can understand at this time.
It should be interesting. It should be interesting to see this little homeschool experiment.
Yeah. So, all right, Pete, thanks so much for joining us. We went a little bit over, but we'll be here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you haven't caught Pete's show, it's 7:10 every morning, YouTube. It's on Facebook Live, and I think he still does it on Instagram. I think the best place to catch him is on YouTube because they read your comments on there. And they could talk back to you on YouTube, and you have them all recorded, and you could go back and look at all the. You're on what, episode 120 now or something?
I think 113 was this morning.
113, and we're inching our way up to 420, which is Pete's birthday. And we've been looking forward to this month for a long time for 2020, and I think the whole cannabis industry has. And it's been completely shut down for not only us, but for everybody. And, Sam did say something earlier back in 2008, 2009, 11, and 12. And even when the hurricanes have come through, I think I felt more stressed during those periods of time that were either regional or isolated to certain businesses and certain types of areas, as opposed to now where I do feel confident that there is going to be relief for some small businesses, that there is going to be some, adjustments. And I still think this, I think we're all going to come out of this stronger. We got to use this time to reevaluate. I know that it's going to be painful, especially for these large companies. I know a lot of chains are going to be shutting underperforming locations, and they're going to be transitioning. And we're going to see a real change to the industries as a whole post this adaptation time. So it's the time of adaptation. It's been labeled, and we're all adapting. I mean, even the dry cleaners is shutting down some of their underperforming locations in this scenario.
And
so there's going to be
I saw a
opportunities out there.
I saw a thing this morning from Forbes. So what was it, Colleen? Forbes, where it said that there was going to be something like 94 million new home businesses launched over the next year or something like that.
Yep.
I think it's going to come next 5 years. It's going to completely change. I think this is like a catalyst for, you know, an entirely new type of economy. I mean, if you really wanted to get into the conspiracy about it, I mean, if you needed something to push, to give a jump start to a different type of economy that isn't based on factory work, this is a goddamn good one. You know?
So this reminds me of when, like, my brother-in-law owns a huge, you know, metal fabrication company, and about 20 years ago when he took it over from his father, he fired everybody and then just rehired the people that came back that, you know, were useful. And we've seen that happen in a lot of other micro situations or companies that just basically get rid of everybody and then make everybody reapply. I think some of the dispensaries have done that recently here in Florida, even, where they got rid of their entire marketing teams and marketing groups, and then they made people reapply to come back on board because they, you know, you're kind of building a business as it's going. So, you know, it's like a plane flying and you're putting your wheels on while you're flying, and then you're realizing that you're carrying a lot of dead weight. And, you know, this is almost like a economic cleansing, so to speak. Or, you know, Neil's on here saying new growth after a fire when everything gets burned down. Or like in Miami when Hurricane Andrew came through in 1992, it revitalized that entire city because, you know, new buildings were built and new building codes were implemented going forward. And I believe we're going to see that. We're going to see an economic opportunity for people that want to go out and do their own business and run their own company. Maybe they're tired of working for big companies. And I think we're going to see new businesses arise and come out, you know, whether it's personal shoppers or more delivery services. My fear is that it's all going to be automated, and, you know, these people delivering your food are going to be replaced with AI cars. But, you know, then
it is, but that's what's coming, you know. So I think that the entire economy, our entire way of life is going to change, and it's going to change really rapidly because of technology, because of automation, because of all those cars that are going to have to drive themselves in order for traffic to flow really, you know, well. It's going to change, and you have to change everything, right? So you have to get out of this idea of going to work in a cubicle or going to a factory and doing something over and over again or crunching numbers. And we're going to get into a more economy that's based on resources, and an economy that's based on intellectual property. What you have to offer, liberal arts degree is going to become a lot more valuable. Humanities, things that can't be reproduced by a computer, things that can't be automated, are going to become a lot more valuable over the next 20, 30, 50 years. And this, like, to me, is like, if you wanted to, like, really, like, punch people in the face and say, okay, we got to start something new, this is a good way to do it without having to say, okay, well, we don't need your job anymore. You can get a lot of people out at one time, and then you can automate those jobs coming back and retrain those people while they're home for other things. That to me sounds more like a way to take advantage of this situation as opposed to a cause for the situation. I just don't think it's plausible, like, knowing everything that would have to be involved for it to actually be a conspiracy. But it would be a good way to take advantage of this situation, because there's no fighting automation, and nor do I think we should fight automation. Why do we want to limit ourselves to riveting something when we can, you know, as a species, can raise our capabilities and just, like, evolve and to you know, do other things? You know, we don't have horse and buggies anymore, you know.
I was just thinking the same, you know, well, when horses, you know, didn't want new vehicles, you know, when cars were released on the road, there was all kinds of rules. You had to have a flag man in your vehicle when you were driving to make sure that you didn't go over the speed limit, because they were so fearful that, you know, automobiles were going to replace, you know, horses, obviously, and they did, and, you know, evolution happened. But every great evolution has occurred sometimes over a period of time, and pieces of it have been slow to die. Whereas I think right now this is like we're fire scorching the earth, and now everything is going to either grow back new or be obsolete.
Yeah, and unfortunately with technology, it grows exponentially. Unlike our knowledge and our brains don't grow exponentially. And that means that, it doubles every time, every couple of years. It's like Moore's law. Technology doubles. So like you think of how powerful your first iPhone was and how your iPhone powerful it is now. Technology grows so fast that it's going to be hard for us to keep up with it. And that I think is our biggest challenge moving forward, is how are we going to keep up with the pace of technology,
Yep. All right, Pete, thanks so much. I'm going to give you a ring later on. I got a couple things, but have an awesome day. Have a good weekend. Keep putting out content. it's good.
All
All
right,
right,
man. Thanks, man. You too.
bye now.
Have a good one. Take care.